The motion for this debate is, this House believes that nations which refuse to include women athletes on their teams should be barred from participating in the Olympic Games. Without further ado, I invite the first speaker of the proposition to open the debate. Please welcome Yao.
Ladies and gentlemen, with some believe the Olympic Games is only about sports, so if some other countries use this platform to promote its own values, it believes that the International Olympic Committee can only stand by. But the case is not. When in our society, we find that a lot of countries do not regard it as the only sports platform, but a platform to show its political values and its international influence. So, if the International Olympic Committee do not do nothing at all, and to do something to prevent it, some will accuse it as politicizing Olympic Games. But we believe it is not fair. Because Olympic Games is such universal, influential games that if we do not control the value, it will against the will of the international society. So today we come to this motion. We believe that we should bar those countries who exclude females in their national teams. What we mean when exclude females, later please. They do not let the females join their national team and at least the selection of the whole selection of Olympic Games. And what do we mean by bar it? Coming from our policy. For each country registered to participate in Olympic Games, we provide them two tools. First is include both female and male, and if do not let them to participate. So today I will generally produce three things. Why this action shows gender inequality that is totally against the will of Olympic Games. Second is why it is wrongly used for the country to promote its value in Olympic Games. And third is why our International Olympic Society should take actions. Okay.
Do you really think that countries who don't send female athletes actually do so to propagate their values to the international community?
Okay, even if they do not deliberately promote their values, we believe that they were spontaneously promoted values, and sometimes out of the control because all of the audience internationally will watch their actions. First, why we think this action is gender inequality and is wrong value? How does this value reflect on these actions? First, three layers. First, women are weak. Women are weak. They do not qualify to participate. Second, women can be present on some formal occasions. That is the case in some Middle East countries, and women can only stay at home. Third, women cannot be independent that can represent the owner of the country. That leads to a conclusion that later please. That leads to the gender superiority conclusion. And what is the Olympics value? Also two. First is all participation. Whenever what gender you are, you have the right to participate in it. And second is equality. Why we say so? It is not only about higher, faster, later please. But in order to let more people participate, we need females and males compete each other separately. That means that even the females are not faster than men, but we give them the chance for equality. And why we think it is wrongly used in the platform? In that layer, I will prove you two things. First, why every country will use the Olympic Games to promote its value, and second, why it is wrongly used by this action. In 1936, in Berlin Olympic Games, Hitler used it as a tool to promote its racial superiority, and that badly hurt the international society. We believe that even countries do not promote it deliberately, just like Hitler do, but they went through every details, even the patterns in their team shirts to promote the value, the symbol, or the country's political influence in Olympic Games. Why is that? For 3 layers. First, because Olympic Games is the only it's one of the only platforms that the whole international society can look at it. And second, every country will take it seriously because it severely regard their national honor and their voice of speak in international society. And third, it will show its strength, show its honor, show its political influence in a proud way. It proudly show its value through sports. So we believe that actually sports in Olympic Games in our society has become a tool for the countries to let the sports speak for themselves, speak for their value. That is, every team in Olympic Games has their value, to let the value conflicts with each other. And why we think that's wrongly used by this action. In their own country, we will discuss this in their own country and in its international society. If there are people, especially females in their own country, say that the country, the national team with all males is trying to normalize the thing that females should not participate in the games. And spontaneously, all of the females in those countries with gender discrimination will take it for granted and stop fighting for themselves And what is more severe is the wrong image in international society. It shows it as a strength. There has been universal consensus that gender superiority is a severely wrong thing. But despite the pressure, the country in Olympic Games still show it as a strength and proudly show it to compete with this, to let this compete in their national teams. So we believe that the other country, especially some liberalized country, who take it as who will be severely offended by such infringe of human rights. And same layer, why we believe that International Olympic Committee should take action. But before I go on, yes.
Prove to us how banning these countries from participating in the Olympics will suddenly create a movement.
Okay, I know that. We are not going to say that effectiveness is 100%. But we believe that first layer, it will help because every country wants to let this want to use this platform to show its strength, show its value. But even if it doesn't work so properly, it is still okay. Come to my third contention. Why International Olympics should take actions. First, we believe that some of the wrong values in Olympic Games has all of the control of the whole people's of the general's will. And the international Olympic Games must control the spirit and promote the spirit that is universally consent to be good and prevent the spirit that is universally consent to be bad. One example is in South Africa. Some years ago, South Africa had the racial superiority, so their rugby teams are only consist of the white people. And International Olympic Games banned it because they think it is a universally regarded wrong value. We are not going to say that only international society, the Olympic Game Committee should control the values. But because there are different values and it's hard to have a universal criteria. But maybe the gender superiority is a universally wrong value that everybody in this world considers to be bad. So that is why they should step in. And second, we believe there's a clear difference between national team and professional team. We should not ban them in professional team because the professional team for sports, but national team represents its country's value. So if the individual players do not have the value of gender superiority, but we should also do not prevent them from that. Why is that? Because it prevents national value as not his own business. Based on all these reasons, we fight for a clean and wrong value world. Thank you very much.
Speaker spoke for 8 minutes and 10 seconds.
I thank the first proposition speaker for her speech. Audience members are reminded that if you need to enter or leave the room during the debate, please only do so after each speaker's speech to avoid disrupting the debate. And now, to open the case for the opposition, please welcome Alicia Lin.
biggest flaw inside proposition today is that they haven't achieved their own goals that they have set for themselves. We understand that the primary goal of the entire policy is to encourage gender equality in these probably more patriarchal societies. But we think that the biggest problem is that they are unable to fulfill it. Instead, they're going to continue to alienate these countries and discredit their efforts that they have taken to promote gender equality in these countries. Now, two main points of contention for today, but before that, on our policy. We're going to be sticking with the status quo, when we allow countries to send in whatever teammates that they want into their team for the Olympics. I'll be speaking on firstly, how their policy regresses gender equality, and my second speaker will be talking about how about the sanctity of Olympics and how we have to preserve this. Now, 2 points of contention for today. Firstly, on the idea that they brought to us about how countries should be allowed to propagate political values through the use of sports and Olympics. Firstly, we totally think that this is the wrong thing to do and countries do not do it anyway. We think that in the status quo, there are already enough avenues for countries to have political discourse and to try and propagate their political values. We see this in, for example, negotiations and talks with the countries. And we don't think that Olympics, being such a rare event where it can really bring countries together, put aside their differences and really engage in the true nature of sports, that we shouldn't be taking advantage of this and really using it for political purposes. Also, we think that the idea of how countries should be allowed is really unfair because at the end of the day, we still see that the hosting of the Olympics is something that is very elite, it's very exclusive, with only a few countries that is even given this opportunity to host the Olympics and to really get a chance to propagate their values. We see more developed countries with better facilities being able to host the Olympics in the first place. Now then they gave us this really real example about Germany, which we are going to explain to you now, and how it really better helps outside. We think that Germany didn't use Olympics to propagate their values, but rather we think that in this case, it is more of a case of how it really proves how in the time where the countries really face tension with Germany, with UK and US facing great tensions, that Germany was still able to put aside these differences and host the Olympics as the values really hold themselves as. We don't think it is a case of propagating political values, and we don't think that this is the right way that we should be going anyway. And we think that even if they should be allowed to propagate political values, we think that there's some kind of harm in that, because we think that we should still be preserving the value of sports, because the Olympics is a once in a 4-year event. We think it is a very rare opportunity, no thank you madam, where we can actually bring countries together, and we shouldn't be polluting it with political values that can be brought forward in another way any case. Now, on the second point of contention about female rights, quoting their first speaker, saying that in Middle East countries, women always stay at home. We think it is precisely these kind of stereotypes that will continue to alienate these countries and not really understand why the culture is that so. Also, we think that the assumption that they have made very fatally on their side is that simply allowing for this policy will immediately change the culture of these countries. No thank you madam. Now let us give you very clear analysis on how these cultures really work. We think it is a very long-term entrenched culture that has been brought about for the longest time in history. We think that even though it is entrenched, there has been a significant movement towards more liberal mindsets. And we think that we cannot discredit these movements toward more liberal mindsets. And also that the simple fact that you tell countries that they have to send a female representative, if not they cannot take part in the games, will not effectively change this entrenched culture, especially when you're trying to impose this culture on them, especially when us as the outside international community, no thank you madam, are unaware and understanding of the situation inside these countries. We think that the link, because this link is missing, and we think that even if this is so, we think that the right of a single sportswoman who is taking part in their team, for example like one sportswoman who is able to take the rights of a team, we think that it will be harmful to the rights of women in the country itself, when the country itself thinks that this is already doing enough in the eyes of the international community for the rights of women. We think that their side really harms the women that they are trying to help in the first place, especially when these countries don't see it as a value that we automatically see as outside international community, but rather a culture that has been in their country for the longest period of time. We think that it has to be organic change that has to take place. Their side does not facilitate this. Now moving on to my substantive, but before that, yes madam.
Then how do you explain IOC banned the South Africa rugby team just because of their racial discrimination?
Madam, we disagree with the kind of action that is taken in the first place. We think that we shouldn't have banned South African team because of racial discrimination. We think that by doing that, they're going to allow for continuous discrimination in their own country, and I'll be explaining how that will happen in my substantive more clearly with regard to female rights in these countries. Now, to analyze the culture of these patriarchal communities in these societies, we tell you that these cultures are something that is very entrenched, something that has the longest history in all time. But But the thing that we've noticed in these countries is that they're changing with the times. It is not something that they've characterized so far, like what Middle Eastern countries are keeping women in their home. No, we totally contest that characterization. We see that slowly movements that's ongoing in these countries. For example, in Saudi Arabia, where there are actually movements towards the ban on driving towards for women. There's a rising movement of Sisters of Islam, which is actually a feminist movement from within the international community's eyes of the most oppressive religion of all. And also how Malala Yousafzai is heralded as a female hero in Pakistan itself, which is actually seen as a very oppressive country towards women. Now, we tell you that we are the side that provides a more nuanced and complex view of what these cultures are really like. And especially because these cultures are so complex, it is the people themselves who understand these cultures best and how to change these cultures themselves. We think that the change that comes about has to be something that's organic, because these people are the ones that know how to change their culture, their own mindsets, and their own point of view. And we think that on their side, they're only going to continue to perpetuate stereotypes on the side of the international community. When you think that these cultures are something that are very oppressive and very conservative, and that does not help these countries at all. We think that also that there's a very flaw in their correlation. That simply because you don't send a woman into the team, it means that there is completely no rights for women in these countries. We completely contest that characterization, because we give you the fact that how US, which sees himself as a beacon of gender equality, only sends 1/3 of his entire team, which of females. We don't think that this is a correlation that we can actually assess as really like female rights in these countries, and we shouldn't be shutting them off simply because they do not have any females in their team. We think that we must credit that kind of efforts that already exist in these countries as well. Now we're going to explain how proposition really regresses gender equality. There are two scenarios that can possibly happen. One, the countries do not send the whole team because they refuse to send any females at all. We think that especially with the characterization that countries are moving towards more liberal mindsets and are gaining momentum in these efforts, it is worse to shut out and alienate these countries, because they are already, for example, not favoured in the eyes of the international community due to other reasons. For example, in Iran, maybe they do not have the best human rights track record. And we think that if they are going to be further shut out from the Olympics, which is something that is supposed to set aside countries' differences, political differences, and bring people apart, we think that you continue to perpetuate very monolithic stereotypes of these countries. And we think that this is bad, because firstly, you do not help to change the culture. And in the status quo, these countries already do not make an effort to connect with the international community. What you're going to do is that you continue to alienate them, keep them in their small, in their own country, and not really think about changing these cultures. And we think that the worst part of this is that they're not recognizing the efforts that these countries may be taking towards gender equality. Worse off, you anger them and you think and they decide to cut off these efforts entirely. Then another scenario is that they either send women in the team, but we think that this is a very tokenistic measure. Why so? We tell you that they can send it without having significant change of female rights in their own community. Despite the momentum giving traction, doesn't mean that their problem is solved. And we think that you further harm women because they're seen as a ticket to getting to the Olympics, or for example, used as a political battering ram by the entire international community. On our side, we best protect women, we fulfill the goals that they have set on themselves. Go inside opposition.
Speaker spoke for 8 minutes and 17 seconds.
I thank the first opposition speaker for her speech. Now, to continue the case for the proposition, please welcome Mr. Bang Lee.
Madam Speaker, members of the House. When basketball prospered in Afghanistan despite war and chaos, a famous basketball player said, "I know sports cannot change the country. I know sports is not politics, but at least we can feel something from sports." This is precisely the stance that we have taken. We say that although by our action, female rights will not be, gender equality will not be achieved overnight. But the question is, should we take a stance? Should the international community, through Olympics Organization Committee, take a stance on this issue? We say yes. This is the reason why we're so proud to oppose. So as the second leader of the proponent side, I'm going to present you in my argument that why our policy is very timely. It's very timely while dealing with their several battles. But now let's move on to 2 points of contention so far in today's debate. First, Olympic values versus politicalization. So they say that we need to preserve the sports value in this Olympics, right? But we say no. We say from its very foundation, from its very long development, we embedded more and more values into this simple competition. And we say that point has been dropped. And they say it has always been pure, right? They say that Berlin Olympics is a platform of sports competition. We say this is blatantly lying. We say Hitler used the Berlin Olympics as a platform to promote by filming and by international publicity that the Aryan race is best in the world, as contrary to other more inferior races. Second of all, we say even if they have this best wish, right, that sports should always stay neutral and undisturbed by all the affairs in the world, we say they cannot do so. Why? Because the international community and all the Olympics organization committee do not have a control over individual nations, right? We say when the female athletes want to register, want to represent their country in places like Saudi Arabia, their government say, no, go away. Their government say that we don't want you to be a part of our team, we don't want you to be the face, the outer appearance of our team for the international community. So we say this is a clearly wrong. We say for these nations, they are taking a stance that is wrong. Therefore, international community should not stand aside, but instead to step in. Second of all, they say that there are always other avenues to promote gender inequality. Therefore, they are not promoting gender inequality by Olympics, right? We say this is not true. We say the very idea of national representation means that athletes are fighting for their country, are competing for their country. So when there are only male athletes, what does this mean? Very simple. What this will cause international audience to think? Very simple, right? Because this country is patriarchal. This country does not care about female rights. So we think this must be wrong. And by proposing our policy, we are actually forcing them to change. We are actually forcing them to acknowledge this value that will be beneficial to them and in terms of international relations. Now move on to the second contention, right? Female rights. They say that we need organic change. We say yes. But at the end of the day, how organic change happen? We say very simple. We say this precisely because of the change of people's perception of different ideas that push for organic change. Let's take an example of Tom Smith, a famous black athlete in Mexico Olympics in 1964. He famously raised his fist gloved in black to support the civil rights movement back in the United States. And this is not simply limited to the auditorium. This is to the stadium. Why? Because it gains publicity, right? The people back in America, especially for those white people, they have an idea that black people are brave, that black people are courageous, and black people therefore should be respected. So by our policy, while changing the perception of people, we think this is precisely an important step in the organic change that we want as well as them. Now let's move on to my own argument. But before that, any point of information?
Yes. Given that the civil rights movement itself took so many decades to gain traction, how do you think that your policy is going to be effective in actually allowing for any change in these communities instead of alienating them? And deal with my substantive.
I will deal with it in my argument. So my argument is about the timeliness of our policy. The thesis statement is here. Because Middle East is in a critical period of transition, our policy will encourage the nations to change in sport and, more importantly, in wider society instead of alienating them. Why do we say so? We say where are these nations mainly? Middle East, the Muslim countries, the very conservative Muslim countries, and what they have experienced. Arab Spring, they overthrown dictators. So what does this mean, right? We think two levels. First, revolutions make people open to change. Formerly, there are always arguments going on saying that that Muslim, Islam, and these religious sentiments are not suitable for democracy. This country, these people are not suitable for democracy. Therefore, they need a dictator to say what is the right thing to do. We think when Arab people has risen up, they are denying this claim, right? They're saying that we can work for democracy. This is precisely the case we see in Tunisia and Libya and in many other countries.
Precisely.
So what does this mean? This means that they are going to refute the statement that Muslim countries are unsuitable for gender equality. They are going to refute the statement that Muslim countries are unsuitable for national representation that include both halves of its population. So what our policy will bring about? Very simple. Our policy will send a message change in these people, saying that this may not be accomplished in one Olympics or two Olympics, right? Some of the nations may still persist. We may see some of the countries drop out in Rio de Janeiro or Doha. But at the end of the day, we think changes are happening. Therefore, we are making an important step forward. Second of all, on the broader social context, we think there are also changes happening. Qatar has the first female runner several years ago. We think this is a positive sign. What does this mean? This means that these societies are changing. But the problem is that the minorities, the females who have been voicing out for their rights are not that attended to how to change this situation. Give them attention, right? Give them the arguments and give them the right to voice out. So we think it's the same in Saudi Arabia when women are practicing civil disobedience to drive, to defy law that women cannot drive. We say by taking this important step, we are taking a stance for the international community. And women in this country, especially those feminists who are fighting for minority rights, they gain international recognition. They gain that they are doing the right thing for their gender, and this is proved and supported by the entire international community. So we think we can push forward for changes by encouraging these minorities who are voicing out, by encouraging the entire Middle Eastern community that is amid changes. So therefore, our side is more than proud to oppose. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 32 seconds.
I thank the second proposition speaker for his speech, and now, to continue the case for the opposition, please welcome Goh Soo Ning.
Points of contention for today's debate, which you see has not been clearly characterized on the side of proposition at all. And in fact, we've seen that we've made many concessions to our side of the House, and because of this, we'll tell you conclusively in second about how side opposition conclusively takes this debate. Before that, we have two main points of contention for their side. Firstly, the idea of the politicization of Olympics and how countries use it to propagate their own values and how we think that's completely not true. And secondly, on how this affects women and these countries that we are discussing today, which was essentially the crux of my first speaker's substantive that they have not dealt with at all, and we challenge the next speaker to come up and rebut it before it is too late. So, on this idea of the politicization of the Olympics, basically the crux of this idea was that they used the example of Germany to constantly push their point. However, we've already told you in our first speaker, and we've given you the analysis behind this example to show you how this example actually benefits our side of the case. In case that their side of the House has not been listening, and we think that they have not, we'll just reiterate what we have told you in our first speaker today. We tell you that, no thank you ma'am, that in the case of Germany, we see that in that period of time, in the 1930s, we see that there are rising tensions between the countries in the world, between the Axis powers and the Allied powers. And during this period of time, it is essentially crucial for the Olympics to appear as a way of uniting these countries together in a way to promote sports and sportsmanship. This is essentially crucial because we see that even if they're going to talk about how they use this, how Germany used this Olympics as a way of propagating the idea that Aryans were a superior race. We see that actually in the context of the country itself, we see that the quality of life for the people who are being oppressed by the Aryan race, in this case the Jews, were actually better, because in this scenario, the light of the international community was shined on Germany, and this ensured that the people in those countries were kind of protected. Because of this, we see that this example is a moot point coming from their side. It is more important to see that this example supports the kind of case that we are running for, about how sports is a way of bringing countries together. In case that this has not been convincing enough, no thank you sir, bring to the example of how in recent years, North Korea is actually part and participates in the Olympic Games. We show you that because of this, even though we recognize that in the world today, there are many tensions between like the United States and North Korea, we still give them a chance to participate in the Olympics because we recognize that sports and politics are two separate spheres, something I'll be elaborating in my substantive later on today. But we still recognize that it is an important way through sports to engage these countries and recognize that in the international community, it's more than just politics. It is also about people, and people are what we are trying to protect today. Beyond that, they brought to us the analysis that in the international community, when they see countries coming out and they see like kind of the people in their teams of this country, that they'll get a perception that countries are patriarchal. We told you already in our first speaker that we contest the correlation between the people in your teams and the kind of representation in your country. The analysis brought to us by our first speaker of the house never dealt with their side and completely ignored. No thank you, man. And we reiterate for you once again. We tell that the correlation between the number of like women in your team and the kind of gender equality experience in the countries is completely arbitrary. We gave you the example of how America, which prides itself as being like one of the most equal places in the world for gender, only sent like 1/3 of their team, no thank you ma'am, as females. We tell that if you really think that gender equality and the number of people in your teams is that related, then we should see that America would say like half of the team as females and the other half as males. We don't see that happening, therefore we tell you that the idea of people in your teams representing your country as its values, no thank you sir and ma'am, is not true at all. So moving on to the second point of rebuttal on the idea of how this affects women and these countries that we are talking about, the substantive of my first speaker that was not dealt with at all. No thank you sir. So let me talk about my first speaker substantive again and better explain it for the house in case you have not understood it. Basically, we told you that on one we cannot clearly decide a scenario whether these countries will actually go to the Olympics and bring in women into their teams, or whether they will not go at all because of the kind of restrictions imposed. We tell that this characterization has not been clearly brought to us by proposition, and we want your next speaker to clarify it clearly. We told that even so, in both scenarios, it is equally harmful, no thank you ma'am, for the women in these countries anyway. Why so? We told you that if these countries choose not to go to these places, we are further alienating them from the international community. We told you about the pariah status, no thank you ma'am, that these countries already have as a result of the perpetuation of stereotypes that we've talked about today, about how the international community always views like these Middle Eastern countries as like having Islam as the most oppressive religion. We tell that kind of perpetuation of stereotypes added with this with this way of excluding them, no thank you ma'am, from sports, which is supposed to bring people together, is going to further alienate them and only not recognize the efforts of people in these countries who have already shown to be increasing like the kind of traction for women's rights organizations in those countries, with examples brought to us, no thank you sir, by our first speaker today. Beyond that, we told you that if they actually go to these places and bring women into their teams, it is highly tokenistic, because for 3 reasons. We told you that this is an affront to the person's dignity because you're using the women as a ticket to entering the Olympics. Beyond that, secondly, we told you that it's an affront to these women's efforts as a sports person, because now you're not recognizing them for their sports ability, you're only telling them that they're in the team because of the fact that they're women, and the Olympics tells you that they need to have women in their team. Thirdly, we tell you that you're using these women as a political battering ram. We don't want that to happen because we recognize that women are still people. We don't want to degenerate them into just mere objects or political bargaining chips the side proposition wants them to do. Moving on to my substantive for today, which, no thank you sir, which will hopefully clear up some of the things that proposition does not understand on the idea of the sanctity of the Olympics and why this is so important that we need to preserve it. Firstly, we contest the idea that the International Olympics Committee has to be the ones to step up and be the ones to take a stance, because we've already told you that there are other avenues. But beyond that, no thank you sir, hold on a minute sir, there's also a further analysis that I'll be bringing to you in my substantive today. Yes sir?
You said that females are used as tools under our policy. So how do you think of the situation in status quo when able female athletes are denied entry in
So, we tell you that in your own example, you brought to us the example of Qatar, it demonstrates the fact that we've been trying to push from our first speaker today. The fact that in these countries, there's already an organic movement for change, that there's already attraction for women's rights to be accepted in these countries. We tell that this is extremely important. The analysis brought to you by our first speaker, which has not been rebutted at all and still stands strong at this point in the debate. Back to my substantive on the sanctity of the Olympics. We told you before that sports is about equality. It transcends race, it transcends culture, and above all, it transcends politics. This is extremely important considering the context in which we're debating this topic today. We tell you that in the Olympics, what you really consider is the ability of the sports people themselves. And that's extremely important because when you consider the innate ability of how they do their sports, how fast they run, and so on, you're not thinking about their race, where they come from, what kind of countries, what kind of background of the country that they are in, and that is why it is truly important. We tell that the focus of the Olympics is in bringing athletes together, in bringing the world to become a closer place without all these political tensions that we see dividing the world today. Because of this, we think it's extremely helpful when you want to politicize the Olympics. We need to make it another place where these divisions can appear. We feel that for this reason, there are many other avenues for these countries to express their political views. We tell you that there is the UN, there is other international bodies where countries can actually express their political views. We don't see a need for which this has to be extended to the Olympics, and we challenge the next speaker to talk about this as well. So we tell that because of this, it's extremely important that in the Olympics we recognize that there is a need to keep the sanctity of sports, to recognize the efforts of sports people, and realize that this should not be politicized, and we have to keep it divorced because they're essentially two separate spheres that we do not want to see coming into collision with one another. We've told you today how it is actually better on our side for women's rights because of the organic change and why this organic change is so important, and we've told you on how on their side they've actually their own goals that they have set up for themselves, and instead are going to destroy the kind of movement that are already seen in these countries today. Because of that, we tell that opposition conclusively takes this debate. I am extremely proud to oppose.
Speakers spoke for 8 minutes and
I thank the second opposition speaker for her speech. And now, to continue the case for the proposition, please welcome Xiao Yue.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we believe that besides the domestic issues in those countries, what is more important is the international decision, right? So we believe that in their case, if the international community acquiesces that we believe that women should be weaker in your country, it means a very detrimental international image. That's what my first speaker is already talking about. But then, from the opposition, they totally drop the international globe and only focus on their domestic issues. Secondly, even though on the domestic issue, we still win. Why? We believe that our side proposition is actually promoting their so-called organic process in the countries, and we don't see any reason why, instead of just letting it natural, which takes a long time to have the gender equality, why can't the international community to have the pressure on those countries in order to put forward this kind of process? And moving on to a lot of rebuttals. Firstly, about the nature of Olympics, right? So very simple nature of Olympics from the opposition side. The simple sentence is that they think that we want to bring everybody in the world together for them to compete. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a premise, right? The premise is that we believe every human being is equal. We believe that originally we believe that people from different continents should compete together on the premise that white people are equal to black people. So we see now the status quo is that we want to extend this kind of nature. We want to extend this equality in order to tell the international community that men and women are equal in the physical competition. That is a fundamental premise. That equality is a fundamental premise of bringing all the people together. And we don't see why any reason from the opposition side that even though they are unequal, we're still fighting forward to put them together, even though there's kind of conflicts existing. Moving on to the second thing. To talk about about the status quo.
Information, madam.
Sorry, which is really two minor points. First point from the opposition side, that they think that, well, there's no connection between number and no rights, right? Because US, there's only 1/3 of women in US team, therefore women still have rights. But ladies and gentlemen, we believe that there's a fundamental difference between if there is any and how many there are, right? So we believe that on the fundamental reason that US choose 1/3 of the team to be women because they believe that from this calculation they can win more. But the only reason why for those countries that they don't accept women is simply fundamentally because they are women. It's simply because of their gender. So we believe that there's fundamental difference between this. And as long as the country accept that if you are a woman and you are qualified, then we accept you. Regardless of how many percentage the women are, there's still equality existing. Yes.
If the United States took many centuries to actually realize this women's rights through organic change, why is there a need to impose this on these Middle Eastern countries by themselves?
Yeah, she actually is not focusing on what I was talking about, right? So as for the kind of process, organic process, and how we can promote it, I will further explain to you in my consequence rebuttals. So second thing about the status quo is that the first speaker has brought up a very minor point about how the competition will eventually be elitist and eventually be exclusive, because eventually there will only be developed countries existing like China and the USA. So ladies and gentlemen, this is also the same reason why, right? Same reason, right? Because in the end, they are different because of their physical ability. But from the very first beginning, under the status quo, men and women are different because of the gender. So that is why we think their means to exclusiveness is unjust, and we want to change that fundamentally. So moving on to the consequences, which is the biggest clash in this debate. So from the opposition side, they have two layers. First layer, they're gonna alienate all those countries because of two reasons. First, it's a long time process. Therefore, we should not infringe on this kind of process. Second layer, they believe that these countries, if they have this kind of rules, the countries will not be in favor of the international society. Therefore, you are alienating them. So first layer, about the long-term process. Ladies and gentlemen, the first speaker came up and accused us, well, you cannot change the country overnight. It's a very long process, right? But they never explained to us why, as they say, our policy is so weak. How can we gonna change them overnight, right? We're also, from the proposition, we're also just promoting a kind of pressure on them. So we're not actually totally interrupting the organic, so-called natural process, but rather we're imposing more pressure on you, which doesn't mean that if you cannot go to the Olympics, you should totally change your social status. So I don't believe their accusation of our kind of interruption of the natural process is right. Second layer, about this, they kind of think that, well, if the countries are not in favor of the international community, it's alienating them. So ladies and gentlemen, we believe that why we are alienating them at the very first beginning, it's because that we believe there's something wrong in those countries. So we think it's perfectly right? So as long as you change, as long as you have the women athletes, as long as you promote and eventually succeed in promoting the gender equality, we will be in favor of you. So we don't see any reason why they are not in favor, so we should not alienate them. As long as we're wrong, we don't like you, that's it. Second layer, they think that you're going to be more harm to women. Sorry, they're going to be more harm to women. Two layers. First layer is gonna be make women to be a ticket for Olympics. Second layer, that it's gonna enter those kind of countries, because they will be like, I cannot go to Olympics because you require me to do something, so it will anger them. So first layer, ladies and gentlemen, the status quo is that women cannot even be tickets to Olympics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is so sad. And what is the natural process like? Ladies and gentlemen, natural process is when you force something into place, even though there are problems at the very first beginning. But as time goes by, when women are performing well in the Olympics Games, when women are being more equal, and when the country finally realizes that women can be physically beautiful and women can be physically capable, that is the time women are no longer tickets for the Olympic Games. That is the time when women can be totally equal in terms of physical ability. But we see that it is a good start, even though there are still problems existing. As long as we're promoting them, as long as we're making a social change, it's generally better than doing nothing at all. Second thing, it's gonna anger those kind of countries. So ladies and gentlemen, about whether you can anchor those countries, first, they didn't give us any this is really kind of vague, right? They never told us how the country gonna act if they're angered. And secondly, we don't really believe they're gonna be angered because my second speaker have already proven to you how the country will actually do the self-calculation, how the countries will think whether I choose to go with both men and women, it's going to be better than I do not go at all. So this kind of anger, this kind of countries are first very emotional, secondly very vague, and we don't see any substantials from the opposition side. And lastly, about something that is really weird about the Germany case. So my first speaker has already put the case forward to tell you that how Germany gonna win most 99% of the champions. And their second speaker came up and told us blatantly, well, they're not winning, they're just competing. Ladies and gentlemen, how on earth can Germany win 99% of the champions if it is natural, right? So we believe that the case is very realistic under the proposition side, and we're telling you the fundamental harms of how the countries can politicize in this kind of Olympic Games and eventually lead harm to the nature of Olympic Games. So based on all this, go with the proposition side. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 8 minutes and 6 seconds.
I thank the third proposition speaker for her speech. And now, to continue the case for the opposition, please welcome Shami and Chua.
Side proposition gives us assertion after assertion on how exactly just the international Olympic community taking a stance is going to help women in these countries. Now, we don't think that their policy is going to help women at all. In fact, it's going to harm them. In fact, we've been continuously telling you this line of many lines of logic throughout our bench, but they've continuously refused to engage with us on this aspect. And we think this is particularly important because both sides do want the best for women in these countries. We do recognize there's a problem, there's a growing move to solve this problem, and we all want to ensure that females can have equality. I'll be exploring two issues today. Firstly, on the idea of gender equality, and secondly, on what exactly are the values that the Olympics should propagate. Let's first look at gender equality. And to this, they've said a lot of things. They said a sentence about how women stop fighting for themselves when they see a team that's comprised of all males. No, thank you. No, that's completely not true. Because women face that kind of discrimination, and women see the patriarchy almost every single day or when they carry out their daily lives. And women simply aren't as weak as they portray because as they fight, women fight for themselves regardless of the circumstances that face them in society today. Women fight because they want, precisely because they see the inequality that makes them, spurs them on further, that they want to carry out such movements. And in any case, we think that their side isn't going to solve the problem, which is why, and I'll continue to explain this why now. Next, they told us that we need the international Olympic community to take a stance. Firstly, they haven't exactly proven what happens after the international Olympic community takes a stance. How exactly does that even help? No, thank you. Women in these countries, apart from knowing that, well, perhaps the international community supports me, which isn't particularly necessary given the fact that the international community already takes a stance towards this kind of gender inequality, right? That the international community recognizes, and the predominant global trend is generally against this kind of conservative mindsets. Now, the crucial difference, right, is that we don't want the IOC to step in and join in taking this stance. Why? Because of all the analysis we told you, how the IOC and the Olympics is a separate sporting event that we don't think should be corrupted with the idea of politics. And furthermore, because of all the harms that we brought to you throughout our bench. And I'll be explaining on them further. Next, they told us about this point about how the perception of women will be changed, and no analysis at all except some strange parallel to blacks in a certain kind of Olympics. Now, let's analyze the viewpoints of people who live in that kind of patriarchal community itself. They see women as someone inferior to them, as someone who is just there to look good on official records and submit a woman's name just so men can get their purposes and fulfill their interests of going for the Olympics. which they haven't exactly dealt with, apart from saying that no thank you, their perception will change over time. But the problem is, perceptions can only change if you change the root of the problem itself, which is essentially the entrenched culture. There'll be no perception change if you don't change the culture that's already existing in these societies. Now that's why if the culture isn't changed, men will still continue no thank you to be dismissive towards any form of action that they see is supporting women. Now, and that's why that's why the main focus of today's debate really is who better helps this cultural change. Now, what we want to do, no thank you, is we want to support and help the organic change that we recognize is already happening in these societies. For example, give an example of the Sisters of Islam and other forms of feminist movements, no thank you. There's a growing move to repeal the kind of oppressive laws in this society. And instead they want to impose a certain form of culture on these societies, no thank you, and make them and force it down their throats and try to implement within the fastest time possible. No, we tell you it's important for a completely organic change to happen. We ask why so? Because the truth is the only people who truly understand the nuances, truly understand this culture, are the people who subscribe to it originally. And that's why if we want to try our best to convince as many people as possible to drop this culture and look at another perspective of the issue, which is like the female perspective. If you truly want, no thank you, to go deep into this culture and slowly change it from within, this is the only way we can go. Now it can take many years, for example, even in developed countries which are like a beacon of equality right now, they took a few hundred years, starting from the 1800s or even before that. That's why we think no thank you. And especially in cases like female athletes, we don't think there's any form of urgency, they're not necessarily dying at this moment. We don't think there's any urgency that you must hurry up and rush this process at the point where you're gonna no thank you, have no thank you, at the point where you're going to compromise on the quality of this organic change. And that's why we think it's outside that we best ensure organic change and best change perspective, no thank you. On the comparative, right, what outside also does is that we don't isolate these women, we don't isolate this group of people from the international community, because we face it, this group of people are constantly looked down and condemned by the international community. And this really good platform of the Olympics, it's the point in time where we want them to interact with other athletes from other nations, to normalize their interactions, to normalize for they themselves to interact with other people. Then they realize that look, there's also a certain other form of culture. Hold on a minute, and I can probably learn from them or have certain new perspectives in mind. And this can only be achieved when you allow them to be exposed to these new perspectives at the Olympic Games. What do you have to say to that?
Madam, as we know that inside changes also happen because of influences, right? And either they connected with the democratic ideas or they are influenced by the outside world. So what is the difference between the so-called inside influences and outside influences, since we are also promoting a pressure or influence on them?
Madam, firstly, I don't really understand what you're talking about. Are you saying that we want to have a form of pressure to pressurize these people and coerce the people in this nation to adopt a certain form of culture? Well, we are going to say that is completely ineffective. We've constantly challenged them to have additional analysis of how this is actually going to happen, right? But I'm going to further extend this. Why? Because we think fundamentally a person's culture is something that he holds extremely dear to your heart. And these people actually don't think that they've committed any wrong, and they think that they are in the right, in a sense. And that's why we can't simply have a form of imposition of culture. Rather, we need them to realize their wrongs and realize that they need to treat women equally. They told us about how we will slowly change this after a few Olympics, which is not true, because it isn't a habit that's formed over many years. Rather, it's an entrenched culture that we must slowly solve, which is done through our policy. I also like to point out that you haven't exactly dealt with the deep analysis that we brought to you on our side about how it's essentially a very tokenistic measure, and you're gonna disregard the efforts that women have put into their sporting careers when they don't get the recognition of being able, but they get the recognition as being merely a name that they submit on official records. We don't think that's fair to women at all. Secondly, on the idea of who better protects the Olympics, and essentially both sides agree, right, that we don't want any propagation of ideals in this sporting event. The problem with their side is that countries aren't exactly propagating their values because look, the rest of the world condemns it. We don't see exactly how places like Saudi Arabia are going to propagate such anti-feminist values in the world we live today. And given that no countries are propagating, the IOC similarly shouldn't step in to propagate any form of values. If you truly want to achieve equality, which is how everyone can play sports, regardless of the culture, regardless of the viewpoints, regardless of their perspectives, it's our side that best protects the Olympics. And because we best protect females, we best protect the Olympics, please go with side opposition.
Speakers spoke for 8 minutes and 16 seconds.
I thank the third opposition speaker for her speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the team's 4-minute concluding reply speeches. To deliver the opposition's reply speech, please welcome Alicia Lee.
In the world that we are living in today, where there are already rising female movements in the most patriarchal of societies, we think that it's absolutely abhorrent on side proposition that they're going to kill off all these movements by this very strict restriction they're going to place on these countries and absolutely discredit all the efforts that are going on in these countries. We are the side that brought you the best characterization of these countries in this debate today. Now I'm going to move on to the 2 questions of today's debate, which is firstly, whether the Olympics should be mixed up with politics, which I'm going to quickly deal with, and then move on to the bigger issue of today's debate, which was on female rights. So firstly, on the politics issue of this debate, we told you a question from the start. What is the exclusivity of the International Olympic Committee? We think that there is no need to corrupt this entire idea of the games and where people are brought together, especially when people can push through their stances. And in general, the International Committee already pushes their stances towards anti-female oppression in a usual circumstance in politics and in usual interactions with other countries. And we brought to you a very clear analysis in Suning how we need to keep countries engaged, especially through the Olympics, when they are already most of the time alienated, the most patriarchal of societies. And we think that these political divisions shouldn't need to surface in a very setting such as the Olympics, where it's supposed to bring people together. Then we brought to you this analysis that even if individual countries choose to perpetuate their political values in the Olympics, we don't think that the IOC should be taking up this burden and doing so, because we think that it is simply wrong, and it's the duty of the IOC, as said in Suning, how we have to preserve the value of the games, how we should allow people to really come together and despite their political divisions, which already exist in normal society, where its stance is already talked about in normal society without corrupting these games. Now moving on to the bigger issue about female rights. The only analysis coming on their side was that if we place a restriction, the more restrictions as the years go along, as long as people get used to it, the situation at home, organic change will happen. We find that this was a very naive characterization on their part, because we told you this very clear characterization that culture is not a habit. It is not something that you can simply change after certain times. That culture is something that is organic. You have to get the people themselves, the people with the perspectives, the people that understand what the problems and the kind of cultural mindsets that plague their society are the ones that can really change this organically. We told you about the example in Suning, how it is interactions when you allow these communities to actually go to international Olympic games, when they interact with female athletes, that they realize that there are these kind of cultural values that they can actually adopt, and realize that perhaps their own culture is something that is oppressive and something that they do not really like. And we think that it's only at these platforms where we can actually connect with these countries, which on a usual basis are actually alienated from the rest of the communities. This is where we told you that interaction is always better than imposition, which is what their side is going for. This is the way we best change culture, when we actually allow for organic change, when we allow people to interact and actually realize on their own what this organic change is about. On their side, they're simply going to impose these kind of values on them, like saying that, oh, you have to have female athletes in your teams, if not you're wrong. We think that this kind of restriction is something that's especially bad. Let's go to you my analysis in our last 2 speakers. when these countries already see the developed countries and Western countries as more superior and already imposing a lot of values onto them, we don't think they'll be receptive to the kind of imposition that's brought towards them. And also, we told you that on their side, they're simply going to kill off whatever organic change that is happening in their countries. They never dealt with a clear analysis that was brought in my speech and my second speaker's speech about how you really reduce women to tokenistic and forms of tickets, where men see them as simply putting them in the team and then they can go to the Olympics. Especially when countries think that they're doing enough, you immediately halt all organic change. When they think that as long as they send one female representative, in the eyes of the international community, that they're already doing enough for the females, we think that that's really when the harm comes in, when you don't allow for organic change in these countries. Our side is the one that protects organic change and allows for females to really get what they deserve. Their side kills it off. With all I've said, I'm very proud to oppose.
Speakers spoke for 4 minutes and 10 seconds.
Thank you, Alicia Lim. And now, to conclude the case for the proposition and the debate as a whole, please welcome THBT.
International Olympic Committee is not an organization have compulsory power, but it has so many influence. So we can't. Why I choose to do that policy is not because we think we have a 100% system. We think we have a 100% guarantee. It's because we think if we do not do that, but let those countries take it as an honor, it will exacerbate the situation. Their whole argument is based on organic change. But if organic change doing so well, so why we still have our policy today? If organic change doing so well, why it is mutually exclusive to let us use the influence of the International Olympic Committee to push the organic change? And what we found from the history is that so many organic change is not to be pushed by the inner influence, but by the outside influence, just as the Arab Spring and so many organic change. So that is why today we are so proud to propose this motion. Their case are based on two accusations of our case. First, we are politicizing the Olympic Games, and second, we are alienating the countries. First, we think that they fail to respond to the status quo, as so many countries do not take Olympic Games as a sport, but take Olympic Games as a big platform to come up with its own political views and its values. And since the status quo, they do not come up with a policy to change it. So we believe that our policy is to better push the status quo based on the fact. They misunderstand our point that we are not going to make an absolute criteria for values. What we want to do is, we think that the International Olympic Committee should exclude the absolutely wrong value which has reached a universal consensus by the international society, to do not let us be honored, be exaggerated, to be offended by all of the people that believe it's totally wrong. And they told you that our policy is to alienate the country. But they never told you that what is wrong to alienate such a universal wrong value. Even if we believe that, we give two layers of response. First, we believe the International Olympic Committee should not be afraid of alienating such a wrong value, because all of the participation should not be based on the promotion of the wrong value. And second, all of our second speech is about the timely. It's about we take a timely action, so it will not alienate, because there has already been social movement in Middle East, so it has been exactly the time for us to solve the problem, and there has already been a good hint in Middle East to push the organic change. And what is our side burden today to prove you our case? Three. First, why banning female is inequality that is against the value of Olympics. Second, why equality? Why this kind of inequality will exacerbate if we do not take the policy? And third, why International Olympic Committee should take a step. First, they never respond to us that why inequality is against the value of Olympic Games. It seems that they agree that it is a behavior against the nature of Olympic Games. And we told you that because it's normalized the issues, because it deprived the human right, the women's right, so it stands. And second, why is it that equality will exacerbate? We told you through two layers. First, in their own country, it will normalize it and make the female in that country take it seriously. And second, for the international international society, it shows as a thing to be proud of instead of to be shamed of. Disregard of the international practice.